thank you for coming. Now there are some really good white chairs up here in the front. You gotta come and sit in these. They will change your life. People in the back, you don't want to be a little closer? Come on. Everyone close your eyes so the people in the back can come to the front. That's what I do at Mass when they come in late.
It just started.
Thank you so very much for coming to this Crossroads cultural event. My name is Father Peter John Cameron. I'm actually on the board of Crossroads, and I'm a dear friend of Andros Sala, the founder, and the other members who are here. And it is my great joy to welcome you to this wonderful evening with our friend Joseph Pearce. I want to tell you a little bit about him before he tells you something about himself. Joseph Pearce was received into the Catholic Church as a 28-year-old way back in 1989. Prior to that, as an angry young man, he had become involved in radical politics and was a leading member of a white supremacist movement in his native England. He served 2 prison sentences for publishing material like...
He's making this up. Where'd you get that for?
Am I reading the wrong one?
I don't know who it is.
You're not supposed to talk till I introduce you. Haven't you been to one of these things before? He served 2 prison sentences for publishing material likely to incite racial hatred, a hate crime under Britain's Race Relations Act, and spent his 21st and 25th birthdays behind bars. There's a reason we're telling you all this. He was also involved with the anti-Catholic terrorist organizations in Northern Ireland, UDA, and the UVF, and was a member of the anti-Catholic secret society, the Orange Order. He credits his conversion under grace to discovering the works of the writer G.K. Chesterton, the reading of which changed his life. Since becoming a Catholic, Joseph has written over 20 books, including biographies of Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, and Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He has written and hosted 2 13-part TV series on Shakespeare's Catholicism for EWTN, as well as a series of documentaries on the Catholicism of the Lord of the Rings, also for EWTN. He is senior editor at the Augustine Institute and Tolkien and Lewis Chair in Literary Studies at Holy Apostles College and Seminary. He is married to Susanna, a native of California, and they are parents of a 15-year-old son, Leo, and a 9-year-old daughter, Evangeline. Now, here's the thing about Joseph Pearce, before he gets to talk. This is a man who suffered a lot in his life, and here's what he did. He let Jesus Christ love him and redeem him so that his suffering was not wasted. And you know how you know it? You look in his eyes. When you look in his eyes, you never want to leave his presence. I've discovered this hanging out with him the last few days. So when he talks tonight, please don't look at him, otherwise we'll never get out of here. Joseph Pearce. So Joseph, you have to tell us something more about this background of yours.
Okay, he wasn't making it up. I've written a book that's sort of full-length version can be found in a book I published 2 or 3 years back, 3 or 4 years back now probably, called Race with the Devil, My Journey from Racial Hatred to Rational Love. So if you actually want the fully fleshed version, that's where you need to go, but this will be the 5-minute version. So basically I was raised in England, and my parents were de jure Anglicans. In other words, officially they were Anglicans, but that means in practice in modern England they were agnostics. So we never went to church except for weddings. We never prayed at all, ever, at any time. There was no prayer life in the family, individuals collectively. My father was a great influence upon me, and one of the reasons it took me so long to write the book was I had to come to terms with my relationship with my father. Because I had a very close relationship with my father. He was a good, loving father, but of course, and I learned lots of good things from him, but I also learned lots of bad things. Give an example. At the heart of my father's philosophy is this. He said, there were three types of people in the world. There were Englishmen. There were those who would like to be Englishmen. And there were those who don't know any better. All right, so I mean, I know what I am. I don't know what you are, but I know what I am. So I grew up sort of believing in what you might call an English exceptionalism, right? That somehow the English were better than everybody else and we civilized the world, etc. So for me, Shakespeare was the nearest thing to God, because we didn't really do anything about God. We had no prayer life, but Shakespeare was, in my father's view, and reasonably enough, the greatest Englishman that ever lived. So I grew up loving Shakespeare. But as an angry young man, because to me, you know, England was a racial thing, not just a cultural or historical thing, but a racial thing. And so I became very anti-immigrant, very racist, and at the age of 15 I joined the white supremacist organisation and was fanatical and threw myself headlong into it and became the youngest ever member of its governing body, the Executive Council, when I was about 17. I started editing my first magazine when I was 16, back in 1977. So the mathematicians amongst you, and I know we have at least one, have already worked out how old I am. And for editing that magazine, Bulldog, that I was sentenced to prison on those two occasions, spending my 21st and 25th birthdays in prison. But there was a huge difference between the two prison sentences because the first prison sentence, I considered myself to be a political soldier. I was angry with the judge. I screamed at the judge that had to drag me off to the cells. But the second prison sentence, I was sitting in my prison cell on the second day of a 12-month sentence, thinking, this is crazy. I don't even believe this stuff that I've just been convicted for. And the reason for it was between the two prison sentences, I'd been reading a great deal of G.K. Chesterton. And through Chesterton, I discovered other writers such as C.S. Lewis, Hilaire Belloc, John Henry Newman. In that second prison sentence, I started reading Thomas Aquinas. But there's a story I tell, and I think I will tell this, and then I'll probably leave it there for the time being. That I was brought up to be anti-Catholic from my father. I learned it on my father's knee, basically. And he would call Catholics bead rattlers. Right, look at those bead rattlers over there. So, and in Northern Ireland, I was involved in the troubles in Northern Ireland. I said on the Protestant side, and there was a song they used to sing, an anti-Catholic song, which ironically is to the tune of "Home on the Range." It's a weird world in which we live, and I'm going to sing it, singing in the broadest sense of the word. So it was no Pope of Rome, no chapels to sadden my eyes, no nuns and no priests, no rosary beads, every day is the 12th of July. So, I know what rosary beads were. When I was a child, my father came home from the pub one night and my mother had in her possession her mother's rosary beads, because her mother was Irish. And my mother would have no idea how to pray the rosary, no desire to pray the rosary. She just, when her mother died, my grandmother died, she just took them as a keepsake, as a memento. But my father came home and said, we're not having these rosary beads in the house, and threw them out the window. But the second day of my prison sentence, I find myself holding these rosary beads. And I have to this day no idea how I got them. I'm not saying they dropped magically from heaven into my lap, but I don't remember how I got them. But I'm holding these rosary beads the second day of the prison sentence. And I could have thrown them out the window. The window had bars on it, so I couldn't climb out the window, but I could throw things out. But I had no desire to throw the rosary beads out the window. What I had was a great desire to pray. And I'm 24 years old. I've never prayed in my life. But there's a problem, right? I don't know the Hail Mary. I don't know the Glory Be, I don't know the Apostles' Creed, and I had been taught the Our Father when I was, about that high, but I had long since forgotten it. So how does one, thus handicapped, say the Rosary? Well, with great difficulty. But what I did was to fumble the beads and mumble inarticulate prayers. And answers started to rush in, healing started to rush in. I had a great desire to become a Catholic. I started to go to Mass during that second prison sentence. And when I got out of prison, I knew I had to make a clean break for my whole life. Because if you're in something from the age of 15, I'm now 25, I don't know anybody who's not involved in the radical politics. Within the movement, I'm a hero. I'm a martyr. I've been to prison twice. Outside the movement, I'm a pariah. I mean, these prison sentences made front page news headlines. So I'm hated outside, loved inside. It would have been much easier to stay in, except of course it was impossible to stay in because I didn't believe it anymore. So I had to take the plunge into the world beyond, and a couple of years later when I was received into the Catholic Church. So that's the short version.
It's awesome. So it's really the Blessed Mother who brought you back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and again, at first, as with Chesterton, I had all the anti-Catholic, although I wasn't a Christian, I wasn't a Protestant, I was nothing.
Yeah.
I had all the anti-Catholic prejudices against the Blessed Virgin, the Pope, all the usual stuff, as Chesterton did. But actually, once I started moving towards the church, I just developed a great love for the Blessed Virgin. And after I moved to Norfolk in England, when I escaped from London, that's where the shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham is in England. And I would go there many, many weekends. That was my destination, my pilgrimage destination weekends. And she and I formed a very special relationship.
Now I can tell from your accent that you're from South Carolina.
Yeah, yeah. Good, that's congratulations.
Well, I do.
That's what you do? Yeah. Oh, don't give up the day job, Father. I say to my neighbours, we live sort of down a dirt track in rural South Carolina, and I say to my redneck neighbours that my wife and I are as southern as they are. She's from Southern California, I'm from Southern England. What's the problem?
How did you get to America?
Well, I met Susanna, my wife, in Oxford, in England. She was over for a summer programme, and I was the resident tutor for the third week. So, we got to know each other a bit, and then continued the relationship via correspondence. And then when we got married, she moved to England. But I applied for a job at Ave Maria College, as it then was, in Michigan, before I moved to Florida. So 2 weeks after we got back from our honeymoon, which was in Rome, and our marriage was blessed by St. John Paul II, so we got off to a flying start. So about 2 weeks after we got back from my honeymoon, I was offered the job in the States and took it, and I've been here now for 17 years.
And now you're moving to the Augustine Institute as the senior editor. Just tell us a little bit of what that is.
Yeah, the Augustine Institute is based out of Denver, Colorado, and it's really become, it started out merely as a Master's in Theology program, but it's actually become a multimedia enterprise, threatened to become an empire. It produces radio dramas, movies, publishes books. It's taken over the Lighthouse Media thing, which I'm sure many of you know, has a sort of collaborative relationship with Ignatius Press. So does all sorts of exciting things, and I'm going to be on board there as of July the 1st. That's my new position.
Now, I hear through the grapevine that you have a new theater piece. Is this so?
Really?
I heard this.
You heard this?
Yeah.
Yes, actually, it's very, very exciting, and it's thanks to this man, God bless him.
And I want to hear about it because I'm producing it, but I didn't read it. So it's being produced somewhere around here. Is that right?
Very close. I think next floor down. No, 2 floors down.
So not too much of a commute.
Not too from here, no, actually.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically it's called Death Comes for the War Poets, and I do hope you all make a point of coming to see it, because I'd love it to be a success.
Buy the book.
I'll buy the book as well. It's for sale at the back there. I've discovered, by the way, in giving talks, this is a bit different because it's a discussion, but I imagine the same thing applies, that Americans get very uncomfortable if every 10 minutes you don't give them a commercial break. So this is the first commercial break. The books are available for sale at the back there, and please don't take a look. And the other thing you have to realise, whenever you come to any event that I'm involved with, there's 2 of the cardinal virtues are overrated, right? Prudence and temperance. Forget them, right? Spend more than you can afford, all right? Buy one for every member of the family. But actually, then comes the war poets. The genesis of the idea for it, I wrote a book years ago, back in the 1990s, when I still lived in England, called Literary Converts. And it's basically a history of the Catholic cultural revival in the UK. And since then, I've written sort of biographies of individual stars of that revival, so Chesterton and Belloc and Roy Campbell and others. And I've always had in my mind I'd like to write a biography of Siegfried Sassoon, the war poet, who becomes a Catholic as an old man. He's about 71 years old. But his whole life and all of his poetry seemed to be a journey towards conversion, as if, you know, everything is this quest for the goal, which is to be basically to enter the mystical body of Jesus Christ, the church. So I had this desire to write the book, and then I had this thought about, you know, he speaks for himself. If I could just arrange all of his work, well, not all of his work, selections from his work, with abridging it with prose of my own to tell the story, and it would be sort of, if you like, a sort of autobiography. And that never happened either. It was just an idea. And then all of a sudden, and it really was almost a mystical thing that happened, is that I'd done my day's work for the day. We'd had our evening prayers, and I put our son to bed. And it just happened. Basically, that this verse tapestry, this verse drama, which is we're having performed here, poured out of me in about 3 hours. And it's basically tells the story of Siegfried Sassoon from when he's, no spoilers allowed, right? No spoilers allowed. So yeah, so I'll rephrase all of that. It basically tells Siegfried Sassoon's journey. So that there's only 3 characters in the drama. Siegfried Sassoon, and we see him basically as a young man before World War I, then in the trenches, and then as he moves forward through his life, through World War II, etc., and after. And then his friendship with another of the war poets, Wilfred Owen, another great poet. So it looks at their friendship, and then what happens there. Not so much I can say, but is there? I'm not spoiling anything. No. But the third character, and I think this is what makes it very intriguing, is the spirit of death. So the third character is a female character, and she's death. So that allows the whole thing to take on a metaphysical dimension all the way through. The lives are not just facts in a physical sense, there's a spiritual struggle going on. And so it serves as, you know, in medieval art and medieval literature, the memento mori, the reminder of death, was a central part of it. And this whole thing, in one sense, is a memento mori. And the memento mori, theologically, is meant to point us to the 4 last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. So I hope the work on one level, that's what it does. But I'm not allowed to give any spoilers, that's about all I can say.
But you know, I confess to you that history is not my strong suit. And the play, the theater piece is written to commemorate several significant anniversaries of the First World War. But could you say something to us about your own perception of the atrocity that event was, and just help us to understand the context in which your drama is played out?
Yeah, well, I'll answer the question you didn't ask first, and I'll answer the one you did ask.
Okay.
The anniversaries. So one of the things that did inspire my writing it when I did just last year is that this 2017 is the centenary of the United States entry into World War I. It's also the centenary of Siegfried Sassoon's Soldier's Declaration, which is basically where he very courageously, some would say foolhardily, issued a declaration against the war on the basis that it no longer was a just war, and he could have got himself shot for that. So it's the centenary of that, 2017 also, and then in 1957, so 60 years ago, was when he was received into the Catholic Church. And 1967, 50 years ago, was when he died. So this sort of, if you like, congruence, coherence, if you like, of these anniversaries was one of the things that inspired me to write it. So what was your question now?
I can't remember. what makes World War I
Oh, yes.
so different from other wars? I mean, every war is atrocious.
Yeah.
But there's something really bestial.
Yeah, I mean, basically raised the curtain on the 20th century, and those of us that believe in sort of some inexorable human progress, in other words, that the past is always barbaric and the future is always moving forward towards a golden age, how anybody can still hold to that belief after the horrors of the 20th century beggars belief. And World War I was the first great war of the machines. So now prior to that, you had to have skill with arms, and your own muscles, your own skill was involved. You saw the whites of your enemy's eyes. You had to have the courage to engage them. With World War I, people were just being slaughtered by the tens of thousands by new technology, right? by machine guns, by poison gas, mustard gas, by tanks, by aeroplanes. So it was the first great war of the machine, and I think in terms of poetry, because obviously this is about poets, it really signalled the death of what we might call the poetry of war glorified. So, poetry such as Alfred Lord Tennyson's Charge of the Light Brigade, I don't know if you know that, but in the Crimean War there was an error made, and the Light Brigade cavalry charged against a heavily guarded Russian defence, and 90% of them were killed. And but so the courage of that, even though it was an error, half a league onward into the valley of death rode the 600. And again, in 1911, just before World War I, then G.K. Chesterton wrote his poem Lepanto about a historic naval victory by the Christian fleet against the Turks. And again, it's a war glorified. But it was impossible to write such poetry about World War I because it was gruesome. So the war poetry which is featured in the drama, it really shows graphically the horrors of what the soldiers had to deal with in the trenches of World War I.
I remember when I was in high school, I was 1846. We were talking about World War I and how literature changed overnight. I mean, just the hope went out, the light went out of the eyes of the world. And so, I mean, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. I mean, why drag this deeply depressing material in front of people and charge them $25, when, you know what I'm saying?
I think people have the right to be depressed, that's what I think. Why should you deprive them of that right?
Well, you're successful at it. Big jerk.
I think the verse poem itself, it's dark on one level, but it's full of hope.
Yes.
It's full of hope, and it's actually it's about conversion, and it's about conversion. I say I've got to avoid spoilers, all right? But there are surprising conversions going on. Well, I let the cat out the bag about obviously Sassoon's conversion. And that's clearly a large part of the drama, but I think there's a bigger part of the drama which also involves conversion, which I can't really say anything about. I think it's actually a work that takes us, it's like Dante, right? It takes us into the inferno, it takes us into hell, but only to bring us out the other side, and through some sort of purgatorial experience, give us a fleeting glimpse of paradise itself.
Today we visited the World Trade Center Memorial, and we were standing at these, as you've seen them, these massive, what do you call them? There's just huge square pits. And Joseph was praying there, and you just have this sense, as the water pours into this abyss, you just have a sense of how the abysmal ransacked our nation and the world in that event. But that's not the last word. So for me, working on the play, what I find very dynamic about it is you can bring your own experience with the Inferno to this theatrical event, and had it transfigured along with these characters.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, said something about my own journey and where I've been, to prison twice, etc. But one of my favourite ways of looking at this is actually, how many people here... See, I've been a college professor for too long, so I can't ever give a talk of any sort without asking for a show of hands about something. How many people here have read, or have heard of Malcolm Muggeridge? Ah, look at this. What an intelligent audience.
I told them in advance. I told you to ask them in advance.
Oh, you did? Excellent. That's almost amazing as you discussing First World War in 1846. That was really amazing. So by Malcolm Muggeridge, you know, he became a Catholic when he was, I think, 78 years old. And there's a press conference. He's very well known in England as a TV star by now, one of the first sort of talking heads on TV. And he was, to put no finer point upon it, a serial fornicator. He'd betrayed his wife on numerous occasions. The fact how their marriage survived is itself a miracle. So here's the 78-year-old man, he becomes a Catholic, and there's this cynical young journalist. And he says, well, you know, Mr. Muggeridge, you know, you've had a good time in your life, haven't you? So Muggeridge looks at him, right? And he says, you know, you've sown your wild oats, you've enjoyed yourself, and now you're too old to enjoy yourself in that way any longer. You become a Catholic and tell the rest of us we shouldn't be enjoying ourselves. How would you respond to that? And Muggeridge says, I regret all my sins, especially insofar as they've hurt other people. And he would have had his wife in mind. He said, but I don't regret the path that I've taken because it's led me to the foot of the cross. And that's profound. So for me, for instance, you know, in my own story, there was a period in my life before we moved back to London and I went off the rails. Well, I was very successful, very well adjusted, and my father wanted me to become a bank manager. Say we continued living in rural England, and instead of coming to London, getting involved in radical politics, going to prison twice, I'd become a gentle bank manager in a village and become thoroughly bourgeois and never, ever thought about becoming a Catholic. I mean, can I possibly regret the 2 prison sentences if it's led me into his mystical body? No, I can't. I can't regret the path I've taken. I can regret the things that I did that hurt other people, of course. But I can't regret something that brings me to the foot of Christ's church, his cross.
So, Joseph, you obviously are a very accomplished author, a scholar, professor, but what surpasses even all those tremendous credits is that you really are an evangelist, right? You really have a heart for bringing to others the power, the beauty of the gospel, especially through the agency of beauty. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously it's... You've almost made me speechless, it's unusual. I am an evangelist. I don't necessarily, yes, I am. I don't often call myself that, but I am. And I do believe in evangelizing through the power of beauty. And I believe evangelizing through the power of beauty is particularly necessary in our own day and age. And the reason for that is that the 3 transcendentals, they're known for too much of a tangent, the good, the true, and the beautiful, which we maybe want to talk the good as virtue or love, and the true as reason, and beauty as beauty. That they are in some sense a manifestation of the Trinity itself, or himself. Because, you know, that what is true is always good and beautiful, what is beautiful is always good and true, etc. But somehow or other we distinguish when we seem to need to. But in our age, love has been, the meaning of love has been so perverted and ultimately inverted, so it becomes narcissistic. So from a Christian perspective, to love is to lay down your life for the other, right? For the beloved, for the enemy, for the neighbor. But love now means a feeling, right? That somehow I get a feeling which is irrational. See, so the choice to lay down your life for another is a rational choice. There's a connection between love and reason when a Christian talks about love. But when you talk about this romantic understanding of love, it's all about feelings, and it ultimately becomes narcissistic. That I love you because you make me feel this loving thing inside me, and when I don't feel this loving thing inside me anymore, I don't love you anymore, and I'm going to find someone who I do love, right? In other words, someone else who makes me feel good, right? So if love has been completely and utterly distorted and inverted by the culture, it's difficult to evangelize through the power of love. No, it isn't, because still, to become a saint is the way to get people to become Christians, right? So you just need to become saints. I became a saint last Tuesday. It's not that difficult. But clearly, that's the rule. That's the witness of